All right, we are gonna get rolling here. We'll at least start setting up here. Okay, let's see what we got here. We are going to be working on this figure. Let me get it all going here. Oh, where's my... How about we get some things in focus, huh? Let's zoom in. We're working on this bad guy. Yeah, let's do this. Oh, I think that's probably about right. Need to fix my color. Wish there was a way to save these settings. Sure there probably is. I should figure out how to do that. Okay. Here we go. I think that's an okay spot for me to work in. Bump the camera a little bit. If not, we will adjust and figure it out. Okay, so today we are going to be working on NMM, which is fancy talk for making things look metallic that are not actually metallic. So what does that mean? Well, for a long time, painters did not have any kind of fancy-dancy metallic paints. So when I'm saying metallic paints, I'm talking about stuff like this, where it's got actual like metallic flake in the paint. Yeah, let's go. This was not a thing for a long time. The only thing that existed was matte paint. There was some stuff like gold leaf and some really specialized paints, but for the most part, those were not really an option. So people painted with just normal matte paint and made things look shiny, and nobody really thought anything of it. When figurines came about and they had the option to start making those kind of paints, they became used because it's a heck of a lot easier than it is to make something look shiny on a three-dimensional surface like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to start putting some paint down here pretty quick. We're going to go over a few things first. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this. This is not a subject that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this. But I feel like I have enough of a foundation in that I feel comfortable doing some teaching for you guys. So I think you'll appreciate that. I've taken NMM from at least 5 different painters, classes from at least 5 different painters, and they have 5 different ways of doing it, which is frankly kind of crazy, right? Like there should not be that many, but there is. And so you'll hear me say something today that some other painter will probably wholeheartedly disagree with, or you can't believe they do it like that, I do it like that, or any number of things. So don't worry about that. Just take what you can away from it and we'll move on. So how do you think make things look shiny? Well, what you're trying to do is you're trying to fool your brain. You want something that is actually matte to appear to be metallic. So what do we do? Well, let's go look at some actual sword references here and talk a little bit about them. So we look at this kind of a sword. This is an actual photo of a sword, and what do we see? Well, when we look at this guy, we notice that the bottom edge of the sword is mostly brighter towards the hilt, and then it fades down and it gets darker towards the point. And the opposing side is the exact opposite, but it's mostly dark, okay? And then inside the channel, right next to the lightest parts near the hilt are the darkest parts of the channel, and then right beside that are the lightest parts of the channel. So what you've got is you've got light parts next to dark parts, next to light parts, next to dark parts as you move up towards the hilt and everything. So it's the contrasting of light and dark that makes things appear shiny. Okay, it's kind of a hard thing for us to get used to when we're talking about miniature painting because we're used to doing smooth gradients. We want everything to be smooth. Now you'll notice that as we travel the length of a sword, this is a pretty smooth gradient. You'll also notice this doesn't appear like super shiny because it doesn't go super dark. It does appear shiny, but like no one would ever think of this as like chromed or something like that where it's just super shiny. Okay, let's look at another one here, see what we get. All right, this guy. So very similar, but a little more stark differences in some places here. If you look towards the point, we've got the absolute widest point here, which is near the point, and then next to it is the absolute darkest point, which is near the point. Okay, and then there's just a line running down the middle of the sword until you get to the blood channel there. Okay, and then we've got the same thing. We've got the darkest part of the blood channel right next to the lightest part, and then the lightest part of the blood channel right next to its darkest part, and then it goes to the dark part of the sword. So we've got that interplay of dark light, dark light, dark light. Okay, it's that having those things right next to each other that creates the shiny. Now, so far on these two swords, we've looked at pretty smooth gradients and what appear to be single light sources on a straight blade. Okay, so everything looks pretty simple. Okay, when we get to something more complex, like a samurai sword, okay, the blade has a slight curve. There's possibly multiple lights here. There's at least more than one. There might be as many as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 in the scene, but I'm pretty sure there's just a couple of light sources. What happens along this sword in this environment is the light actually bounces. If you see this big center part that's super bright in the middle, the light is angled towards the hilt, so the light actually hits that part, and you can think of it as kind of bouncing along. So it does this, and then the next one towards the hilt is the second largest, and then the next one is the third largest, and it gets smaller every time as it kind of bounces along. So it creates those reflections of the light source. Now, when you're looking at your light source, the reflection on your blade is always going to be the same color as your light. Okay, so that is literally, if you think of it, that is a picture of the light that is lighting your blade. Okay, this style where it's got this bounce light is a lot more complicated. We're not going to tackle that today. That'll be a part 2 or a part 3. We're going to go back and we're going to try to tackle something that looks a little closer to this and this, where we've got one gradient, two, smoother gradients. Oh, where's it coming? There we go. Where the gradients are smoother, we don't have a lot of bounce, because the other thing is a lot for you to try on your first time. It's not that it's super, super hard. It's just a lot for you to try. Okay, so everybody always says, where do you choose where to put the highlights? And there's probably 50 different videos out there. I know Cujo Painting has a really good one. I'll put a link after this in the YouTube video. I'll put a link to his. He has got a great video on where to put the highlights. That used to stress me the heck out. Okay, if the light is coming from this direction, does the highlight hit here, or does it hit here, or does it hit here? Do I start at where do I start? Because I could always figure it out because of that alternating dark and light. Once I got something down, all I knew that I had to do was if this is light, this is going to be dark. If this is light, this is going to be dark. Once I got somewhere to start, I could kind of make it work. But getting somewhere to start was actually the really hard part because I couldn't figure out where the light would hit. When I took a workshop with Sergio Calvo, a lot of his advice basically came down to your audience doesn't really know where it's going to hit either. And as long as you make it cool, they're not really going to care. So there's a little bit of a rule of cool here. When you start having a lot of other complex things, you just have to be consistent. But for here, if we want the light source to strike down here, we can do that. We can make that the bright point. There's a lot of different things we can. But here's the deal. We don't want to draw too much attention away from the actual figure up here. If we put the brightest point down here, what's that going to do? Everybody's eyes, when they're looking at the model, are going to go all the way out here and then off into nothingness. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we do a light point up here, okay? And then that way the focus stays towards the model. We always want to be drawing the attention towards the model, guys. Okay. One of the other things that we'll talk about it a little more in future ones. Basically, there's certain clues that we can provide that tell our eyes that things are metallic, that things are shiny. Shiny things, they have that bright contrast that we talked about. They have the lights next to dark, which is going to be the focus of today largely. But then they also, when we're talking about a sword, the brain kind of expects it to see little specular highlights. By that, it means just little pieces where it glints off a little bit more. If this is a sword, like this guy's been in battle, he's got little nicks and dings and stuff. It's not going to be super smooth over the whole blade of the thing. And by adding little bits of nicks and dings, we give more information to our brain to be able to tell it, hey, this is actually something shiny, and those little cuts and dings are reflecting. It's another clue for our brain to say that's something shiny. The more clues we give our brain that it's something shiny and metallic, the more it's going to say, hey, that looks metallic. Okay. The other bit that I would say, if we had first time catching you live, oh, awesome. So, yeah, so when something metallic is next to other colors, it tends to reflect those colors. So, if this is a good example, the ground here, if this was a green grassy ground, we would definitely be putting shades of green into our blade here. Okay, we wouldn't want to do this solid steel with no other colors because it wouldn't look like it was actually reflecting the ground then. Okay, if this up here, if he has this red cloak or whatever, we might put little bits of red in there. If the sword was standing more up like this, we would want to be reflecting some skin tones in there, okay? So if you add little bits of your environment in there, it's really going to help sell the effect because your brain knows what metal things are expected to do. If you add little clues that tell it that things are metallic, it will help. All right, so let's start getting some paint down. Paints I'm going to be using some clear red and some clear green here. Okay. And then a little bit of coal black, some bright ivory, and some bold titanium white. All right, I'm going to go ahead and lay these out. Now, if you're wondering why I'm using the red and the green, it's because making an interesting gray is a lot more interesting than putting down gray. So I'm going to mix some red and some green together, and we're going to make an interesting dark gray because it's going to look a lot better than just putting some gray down. So if we look over here, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'll do all the palette here. This is a little coal black. I'm not going to use this coal black for much. If we just need to go really dark on some part, we're going to use it. I'm going to focus on one side of the blade tonight, guys, because it's going to be too long to do both sides. I'm going to focus on one side of the blade, but basically, when you go to do the other side of the blade, you just reverse it. The parts that are dark on one side are light on the other, and you just remember that whole dark next to light next to dark next to light stuff. Okay, so it's not hard at all. Hey, Kenshin Painter. Alrighty. So we're just laying out our palette here. We're using some black, some bright white, some ivory. That is if my white cooperates with me. Come on out, white. There we go. Okay. So why am I mixing these to make a gray? Because they're complementary colors. If you look at Mr. Color Wheel here, we've got gray and green here. So when they're across from each other, if we mix them, then they go kind of gray black stuff. So we're doing this because then what we can do is we can incorporate some of these other colors in the rest of the figure. Look at that. See how dark that just instantly went? And then we have kind of this purpley gray, and if we want to tilt it one way more than the other, we can. If we want it to be a little more green, we can make it a little more green. If we want it to be a little bit more red, we would just add a little bit more red. Okay, so now I'm just trying to get this to the point that I want it as kind of our darkest color here, and I want it about like that. Okay, So that looks super dark on camera. It's kind of a plum color in real life, I would say. Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're going to make this part light, this part darker, and then this part dark and this part light, but not as light as this. Okay, I'm going to sketch in kind of the highlights and the darkest places, and then we'll come back in and we'll start transitioning on them. Okay, so this is going to be dark right down here. I am fairly thin on this paint right now, not for any reason other than it just kind of happened while I was mixing. I don't normally paint super thin. This is just the way that it kind of worked out right now. So you can see I'm doing that. Okay. The light source we're imagining is coming right here. If you actually want to be super good about it, that means that those angles should come like that with the section of your light source. Okay. So we've got our darks, but then we've also got to lay in our blood channel darks. So that means this. Oop, our blood channel dark should be there. Our blood channel dark should be here. Okay. Whenever you have edges on something, edges always reflect the light a lot harsher than anything else. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our white that we're using here is only going to be reserved for super bright spots that we want to sell better. So we're not going to use that as our highest highlight unless we just feel like we need to. It'll be on there, but in much more reserved quantities. Okay, if you go back and look, I'll pull them up here in a second. If you go back and look, our swords had a lot more bright spots than you would normally expect them to be. Okay, it wasn't just the barest tip of the tip, or the or just a little spot here and there. A huge portion of that sword was actually pretty daggum bright. Okay, so this right here theoretically would catch a little bit of light under the slip. We're not going to add too much. We'll probably tone that down. This is pretty hard to do on camera. Okay, so we're just going to come like this. Okay, so you can see we've sketched in our dark and our light values here. I'm going to come back in here. Okay. Alrighty. What are we doing here? So this should be kind of slanted a little bit like this. This slanted a little bit like this. Alrighty. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're just trying to help ourselves see it. We're going to go ahead and add the edge highlight here because it really helps sell the effect. And then after we just lay out these values here, you see I'm just running. See, that looks super close to white, but that's actually just ivory, which leaves us some room to go brighter. All right, now if we want to catch this blood channel highlight, how do we do that? We get paint on our brush. We make sure that it's a little flat, okay? And then we don't want it super thin with where it's going to run. And then we just drag along there. But if you get your brush a little flat, it's really going to make that easier. We're going to have to do this step where we just edge highlight it again before we're done, but it helps see everything. Doesn't matter where your brush stroke ends. Generally, yes, you should always end your brush stroke towards where you want the most paint. Okay, that's really when we're trying to create gradients and stuff. When we're just laying down base coats, it's not as important. But when we're trying to do gradients, yeah, it absolutely matters. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our, this is our dark color that we made, and we're just going to start making some lighter colors out of it, okay? And we're just going to use those to kind of start smoothing this out. And there's really, you can do whatever kind of technique you want here, okay? Just to kind of create some smooth transitions. I'm going to be honest, NMM is not really that much about the transitions. It's really more about the contrast and selling the little effects. There's plenty of ancient swords out there. I should pull some up that look downright textured and dirty and stuff like that. So you really don't need it to be super duper smooth. It just needs to look intentional. Okay, so you can see we're starting to get a little bit here. Okay, we want, if we look at our swords here, let's go back and look at our reference. Okay, let's go look. Where's my mouse? There she blows. I think this one. See, this one better? Do I like this one? Yeah, okay. If you look at this one, see how much of the sword is actually white? A huge amount of that sword is very, very bright. If we want a bright sword, then probably a larger portion of your sword than you think should really be bright. So what we want to do then is we need to make this section here way brighter, right guys? So we're going to take and we're going to mix and we're going to start working that a lot brighter. That's going to be the first step. Okay. So we probably want almost that much of it bright because we really want this guy, he's got a pretty good sword. It always kind of helps if you make up some sort of story in your head for your character. Like give this guy some actual life to him. Most of the transitions that I'm doing here, I'm glazing or just doing very thin layers here because of the nature of this flat surface here. And then the inside channel is definitely going to present the biggest challenge for me to do on camera. Okay. Okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to keep working this lighter. We're going to add a little bit down here. I got to keep making sure that I'm painting on camera. And you can see I'm dragging my brush stroke towards where I want it to be the lightest, okay? All I'm doing here is just creating this gradient. And occasionally we'll just come back in here and reinforce some of our, make sure we like kind of the way that it's going. Okay. Alrighty. We need to go a lot lighter still. Okay. Right now, that doesn't read as shiny. That reads a lot more as like stone or something, right? Okay. There we go. We're starting to get there. Stone, it's easy to accidentally, right? With that big of a blood channel, yeah. And you're also carrying a sword the size of you. It's easy for stuff to end up looking like stone when you're trying to do NMM. Typically, what that means is that you have not pushed the contrast far enough. We're going to take a little bit of our black here, and we're just going to mix it in with a little bit of that other, and then we're just going to come back in, and we're just going to hit a few of the places that really would be black. And we're just working this back and forth, guys. Okay. We're going to come down here. We're going to hit this blood channel. Okay. Then we're going to come do some of that. Okay, now I think we're going to add just a little bit of white near the hilt, but not quite on the hilt. And we're just going to add a little bit right there. Okay. We might feather that out just a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to come back in and we're going to we're going to make this dark color down here. Okay. And you can see we've got way more of an interesting color than just gray. It looks a little blue, which I find really interesting since we don't actually have any blue on our palette. Huh. Right? Like, how crazy is that? It looks very kind of sky metallic blue. Okay. So we're gonna do some of this, some of this. Now, the deal with any of this is that it looks better from some angles more than others. I'm not gonna lie. Like, that's totally a thing with NMM. And if somebody insists otherwise, personally, I think they're lying. Like, I've never seen NMM that look good from all angles. You just kind of have to pick an angle that you think looks good and run with it. Okay, so all we're trying to do now is reinforce a few of these lighter colors inside the blood channel. Blood channel is definitely the hard part to do on camera because it requires a level of precision that's very difficult for me to get. Yeah, I mean, anybody who tells you otherwise is just trying to sell you something. All right, so we're going to try to pull some of this down. All right, we need this part right down here next to our lights to be pretty dark. Okay, so this part right here should be dark because it's right next to our light, and that is basically going to cast almost like a shadow here. Okay, and then this. I think we want to make this a little bit lighter. So we're going to come in here, we're going to add some of this. Now, we're getting to the point here where we want to start thinking about adding some character. Okay. I'm not going to smooth this out 100%. It's just not necessary. We could keep going and we could smooth it left and right and we can go back and forth and back and forth. I just don't think it's needed for the level that most people want to get to. But the only thing I am going to do is take a little bit of our pure bright ivory, come in here, we're going to add that, and then we're just going to feather that out a little bit. Okay. All right, so you can see this definitely looks better from some angles than others. We've got too much of a dark transition right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean that up a little bit. That's just a little too stark. Okay, so we're just going to come in here. And we're going to try to get that a little more even. If my eyesight from this angle will allow me. Okay, and then we're going to come down here We're going to do some lighter stuff here. Lighter stuff here. All we're doing here, you can see we didn't have a ton of colors on our palette. I saw somebody recently who was doing NMM. Normally I do have a set of magnifiers, yeah. I haven't figured out how to use them well on camera. They just get in the way of the camera and all that. I saw somebody who was doing NMM and they had like 23 colors laid out, and it wounded my soul. I was like, oh my gosh, that's just not at all needed. I can put a link to the ones that I use. Okay, we're gonna lighten. I don't like the tip of his sword quite that dark, so we're gonna lighten that up a little bit. It's still gonna largely catch the light. We don't want it as dark as this. Like this should be the dark. This, I don't want it quite that dark. So we're gonna mix a little bit into there. Not sure that that's quite having the intended effect. So we're just gonna go over with some real light, and then okay, yeah, that's starting to tone it down a little bit at least. Okay, alrighty. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to come back and redefine all of our edges again, and we're going to use the bright ivory for that. Okay, and we're just going to come through, and we're just going to, this is where you want to make sure your paint isn't too thin on your brush, because otherwise what'll happen is it'll just add a giant thing there. Okay, then we're going to do like I said before. What you want to do is you want to make sure your brush is a little on the flat side like this. Okay, and then we're going to come and we're just going to catch these edges. So if your sword doesn't have good edges to do things like the center channel, the blood channel, or if it's just got one long spine, if it doesn't have good edges like that, okay, if it doesn't have good edges, I'm not gonna lie, I went through and filed these edges sharper. Okay, they weren't bad, okay, but you can make your life a lot easier if you do some prep work on an NMM weapon and just give it nice clean edges. It will make your life easier. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come back with our white, and we're going to add just some little specular highlights to help sell the fact that this blade has a few nicks and cuts and stuff. So, you know, maybe it's got something there, and all we're doing is little dots of white. Okay, and what we're trying to do is just convince the viewer that this blade has some nicks and cuts along it so that it's not even, okay? We're going to come back along the edge of the blade and do the same. And all we're doing is we're just taking and we're just doing little dots. And all it's going to do is help create some visual interest to help sell the effect. Okay? Yeah, you can see it a little better on that angle. Okay? So all we're doing is we're trying to provide clues to the brain to say this thing has some reflected bits in it. Okay, now, what else can we do here? Well, this weapon is almost certainly going to be on the ground. The ground is greenish. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our green here. We're going to thin it way down into a glaze. And we're going to add in a little bit of an environmental reflection in the bottom here so that it gains a little bit more thing. We're just going to add a little bit more green in the midtones and the darks. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to be real subtle, but it's going to make it look just enough different from the top that especially when we put that on some sort of grassy base or whatever, it's going to really look metallic because it's going to have, and I'm just going to speckle some green in there as a glaze. Okay. Sergio Calvo says the only color that he hates putting on weapons like that is purple. He's like, purple just never works. I don't know that I agree with that, but he's like a million times better than me, so we're going to run with it. Okay? All right, so at this point, the other thing that I think really helps sell the effect for NMM is, what do you think? Anybody guesses? Scratches. Okay, so scratches, the way that it happens is the light actually hits the bottom of the scratch. Okay, so if our light source is coming this way, then we got to be careful because what's going to happen is it's going to hit this edge of not a scratch, I'm sorry, like a cut in the blade. So what we want to do, we want to take our black and we want to make a little triangle like it has been nicked out. Okay. Let me make sure. Yep. All right. We're going to make a little triangle like it's been nicked out. Okay. And we're just going to put one right here. Is that on camera? Yeah, that's on camera. And then we'll put one maybe up here. We kind of want to think about where this guy would have gotten some dings and dents on his blade, right? So we're going to do that. And then put one down here. This is a hard thing to do on camera. So what I'm doing is little triangles. Okay. All right, now we need to put the reflection on the triangle. All right, the light source is coming this way, so we're going to put the reflection here. Normally, if the sword is upright, we would put the reflection down here. But the light source is coming this way, so it goes here. And we're going to use some pure white for that. Okay, this is where I really wish I had a magnifying glass. You want the thinnest line you can make. Okay, it's not going to show a lot in that white. That's okay. Part of that's the camera. The camera's dynamic range just inhibits some of this. All right, this guy. Okay, yeah. So you can see that nick now. See that? We're just giving our brain visual clues that this thing is metallic. It expects metallic surfaces, if they're cut like that, to respond like this. So we've just provided additional information about the thing. All right. So we're going to call that, that's pretty much a what I would be happy with if I was doing a basic NMM sword. Okay. Like I said, it's going to look better from some angles than others. That's just the nature of NMM. Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Does it make more sense, less sense? I'm going to clean. That was bothering me. Does it make more sense, less sense? Does it look like shit? Sorry. Look like crap. All right. So again, we're just using this to provide clues about the fact that it looks metallic. Okay. The nick really sells the effect. I agree. You're providing more clues to your brain. Breaking up that visual space helps a lot. Okay. When it's a solid gradient from one end to the next, I don't think it looks metallic at all. I really feel like it needs character on the blade for your brain to get additional information. When we start adding bounce effects on the next level of this whole effect, I think that it helps a lot too. If the blade is new, are there any other clues to give the blade more metal? That would be when we start looking into next week, which is when we start talking about bounce effect, and we'll work more with the environment and stuff like that. Adding a little more green down here. If we had a sword that was more upright, and we could do some more reflections on the from the person itself, those kinds of things help. Aaron Lovejoy told me once, and this is good advice. If he has to paint something that looks, quote, new, it's way harder, and he actually charges more for it. That's what he told me. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he told me, and it makes a lot of sense. When you get to texture things, when you get to add nicks and cuts and things like that, it really helps sell the effect that something is real and not a cartoon. Okay, when something looks like it is absolutely perfection, I just don't think it looks that real. Okay, um, when all it was a gradient, it just doesn't look that metallic. Even though everything, let's go back and look at our reference here. Okay, there's no nicks and cuts on there, and it looks metallic, but it doesn't look. It looks a little dull in some ways. Not terribly so. Okay, but the only visual information that we have that this thing is metallic is A, our brain knows what a sword is. It expects to see a sword. It knows that that's metallic, and then B, just the overall light versus dark contrast. Okay, so what I would say here is if you wanted it to look more super shiny, one thing we could do to mimic like this sword is we could push these light values a lot further this way. The channel is basically all dark. Let's look. Not really. If you look, the top of the channel is dark and the bottom of the channel is light, because you're catching that light from the light source that's hitting the bottom of the channel. Yeah. So there's just you basically need to continue to provide visual clues that it is metallic. Yeah. So is this the best non-metallic weapon ever? Absolutely not. Like I said, I'm not going to claim to be a master, but you can see that we talked about things that help sell the effect. The nicks, the little dots of light, the overall contrast is what helps sell the effect. When we start to add other colors like here, like, you know what, I got time. Who wants to do a gold hilt? Let's see if we can pull off a gold hilt on the fly here. Let's pull some yellow. Do some yellow. We need a dark brown. Not too dark, but fairly dark. We've already got some. Not that color. Where'd it go? Is this it? Nope, that's the same one I just checked. Colors are hiding from me. There we go. Dark umber, and then I like an ochre color. Actually, I'm not gonna. I like my absolute favorite color is Watercolors Ochre 4 for gold. I think it's just 4 and 3. I think it just works really well. Let's lay that out. Let's see what we can do to get. I need to shake these like the dickens. All right, you guys may hear a loud noise here. I'm gonna hit mute real quick. I need to make sure these are good and mixed for a second. All right, I'm back. All right, so we're gonna lay these out, and then let's see if we can't make that hilt look goldish. Let's just see what happens. Gold. I find gold easier to do in some ways because you can see I'm just laying these colors out here, and we've already got some white and some black, some lighter colors on our palette, so that's going to help. Okay. I find gold to be easier to do because the colors are more transparent, so it just blends better. All right. I also find, in general, NMM isn't fully sold until you paint the things around it. Okay. I think you should never judge your NMM until things around it are more painted, because NMM next to nothing doesn't really have the visual information that we talk about. All right, so this has a lot of edges, so all of those edges are going to be caught by the light. Trying to take a closer look here in person. Just a second, guys. Okay. We're going to start here. Just trying to make sure I got a good coat of all this. All right, this is a pretty complex shape. Okay, the benefit here is that we kind of just get to pick what we want, and as long as we are consistent, it will kind of work. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say that it's going to be something where the light is going to kind of catch there, and we're going to kind of do that. All right, we're going to mix some of this into this. So we're going to have the light coming this way. Okay. So it'll catch on kind of an imaginary edge there. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to end up using the actual yellow too much. We'll see. Which means the darkest part, we're just going to put some pure black down for the moment. Should be right there. And then it should fall off to lighter down here. Okay. So that's what we're going to kind of do. And we'll just see how it works. Okay. So that went on way too thick, but that's all right. Just got to give it more time to dry now. These watercolors are interesting paints. They're a more gel-like medium. I'm going to give this a little bit of this. Okay. This will definitely not be even remotely sold on this effect until we edge it all in white or ivory. Once we have the ivory in there along the edges, it will look 100 times better. Until that point, it's going to look absolutely nothing like gold. I don't want to edge this kind of earlier than I did like last time. I'm just working these over and over because it's going to be a lot harder to edge this. I don't want to be doing it multiple times like I did before. Okay, we're kind of working our color shade. We're going to go for a pretty yellow gold here. Sometimes I like more of a green gold. Sometimes I like more of a yellow gold. Okay. Okay. We're working on it here. Okay. This Warcolors color is a really good color as a glaze. So we're going to tone a lot of this down, and we're not going to make it super bright in the end because it works better if the edges are the bright parts on small bits. Okay. So all I'm doing is just making little gradients here. This was not planned, so we'll just see how it goes. But it was kind of staring me in the face, and I was like, let's try it. See? So all we're doing is just working this back and forth here till we get something that we're somewhat happy with. And then there we go. That gold color starts to show up a little bit there. Okay. We're going to add a little bit of this in there. The other thing that's really nice to use for gold is skin tones. Skin tones work really well with gold. So all we're doing is we're just coming in here. We're just making this gradient here. Oh yeah, for sure you have to make it. It goes to crap way before it looks better. Like the nice thing is on this on gold, I don't know. I feel like gold is easier a lot. Apparently most painters feel the opposite when I saw like some what's the word I'm looking for? Survey or whatever, and most painters said that they much prefer steel. And I was like, really? That's just mind blowing to me. I find gold way easier. Okay, so we're just building that up. Adding the gold sells the silver. I completely agree. Like I said, this wasn't planned, so we're just kind of winging it here. Winging a prayer. All right. We're quickly getting to the point where we're going to be edging this. I'm not going to worry too much about smoothing all these transitions. This is not a blending discussion, and nor do I want it to become one. Okay. Come in here. Alrighty. I'm going to do just a little bit more of this. And meanwhile, realize there is no ridge right there. There's not a ridge on that part of the the axe at all. I added that ridge visually. Okay. Because it's just more visually interesting. Okay. We're just adding this back and forth here. We are quickly approaching the point where we want. This is just a little too stark for me right up in here. Okay, come down here. We'll just make this. All right, we're gonna go ahead and I don't know. That last bit did not make me happy. We're gonna add some more of this, and then we're just gonna call it done on this, and we will see. All right. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this this ivory, and we're gonna add just a touch of that ochre to it. Not much, probably a little. There we go, something like that. And we're gonna very carefully, and me try not to mess up, catch all the edges. Oops, sorry. Didn't realize I was off. All I'm doing here is edging this. Alrighty. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take some of that same brightness. We're just going to come on this little line right here. Okay. Now we're going to take some of our straight up ivory. We're going to reinforce just a few places because it's going to be a lot brighter. All right, parts that I'm not happy with, you know. Okay. Right, this is turning out to be a pretty dull gold. Let's mix a little yellow in, brighten this up a bit. We're going to thin this way down and just glaze a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to come back in here and we're going to bring this up here. That up there. Okay. Then we're going to go straight to our white here. And we're just adding little bits in some places. All right. We're going to add just a little bit of our purple right here, because I want that to be a little darker. There we go. That helps sells that a lot. And then we'll do that up here. All right, for now, we're going to call that good. We could go on and on and on. I'm not super happy with the gold, but I don't really want to mess around with it too much. The overall effect is what I'm looking for here. Alrighty. So you can see what we've done is, yeah, thank you. So it looks like a metal sword with it looks like a steel sword with a gold hilt. And the cool thing is, like I said, this ridge is not here at all. That is strictly painted to look like that ridge because it was going to be a lot more visually interesting. This piece right here is actually flat. Like there's almost no depth across this whole piece. There's a little bit if you look down. Okay, it's got that slight curve, but we added the ridge so that, yeah, once we get other matte things on there, it's going to make that really apparent that it's shiny. So, all right, guys. Well, we're going to call this one done. And awesome. Thanks, Jamie. So, questions, comments, anything you liked, didn't like? All righty then. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.